And joining us now is Donatella Rivera. She's the Senior Crisis Advisor for Amnesty International. She joins us from London in the UK to talk to us further about the ongoing crisis in Ethiopia. Good afternoon, Donatella. Thanks for joining NewsHour.
Good afternoon.
Now, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has called for complete mobilization against Tigrayan forces. The PM had earlier promised this would end in weeks, but now he's calling on all capable citizens to get engaged in the conflict. So what effect is this decision going to have?
Well, I mean, the fact that the conflict is not only showing no signs of ending, but that it's actually intensifying is very worrying for the civilian population. The civilian population within Tigray, which is where the conflict has been raging for the past 9 months, has suffered tremendously. And now we are seeing TPLF forces moving into neighboring regions, into Amhara region, into Afar region, where new civilians have now been displaced. But obviously, the conduct of hostility is one dynamic, and it does not necessarily have to result in the sort of atrocities that have been committed by the combatants and especially by the forces that have been fighting on the side of the Ethiopian government. So Ethiopian government forces, Amhara special forces and militias allied to those forces, and the Eritrean forces that have also been fighting in support of Ethiopian government forces, have committed very serious human rights violations against civilians within the Tigray region. And specifically, yesterday, Amnesty International published a report, which is the result of several months of research into widespread rape and sexual abuse of Tigrayan women by Ethiopian government forces and other combatants, other forces allied with them. And of course, there is a risk that such violations will be repeated in other regions of the country if the fighting expands geographically to other areas.
Okay. Now, widespread reports of rape and sexual abuse by Ethiopian soldiers and allied groups has garnered international condemnation. Teenage girls are also being abducted. Now, is this psychological war just another tactic of the Ethiopian government to win this impossible war?
Well, obviously, it's impossible to say whether there was any concerted strategy, whether there were any orders given to the combatants and the commanders on the ground. But what we've been able to establish after months of research is that women and girls throughout the Tigray regions have been raped, subjected to other forms of sexual violence and sexual torture. And this has been widespread, and it started right at the beginning, from the very first days of the conflict in the Tigray region last November. And these atrocities were perpetrated by all the forces that were fighting on the Ethiopian government side. And it didn't just happen in some places at some times. It happened everywhere where those forces were present. The brutality that accompanied the rapes was shocking. Women and girls were very often raped by multiple perpetrators. They were gang raped. Several of them told us that they had been held for days and weeks in situations of sexual slavery, during which times they were raped every day by multiple perpetrators. They were subjected to other forms of violence and other forms of torture, to death threats and humiliation and degrading insults against them and their families, their community. Several of them told us that they had been raped in front of their own children, in front of other relatives. So it's really a situation where the perpetrators spared no effort to really inflict maximum physical and psychological and durable damage on these women and girls.
Okay. Now, lastly, Donatella, do you believe sanctions on the Ethiopian government will help stabilise the situation, or will it only push the government to advance their attacks in the Tigray region?
Well, look, I'm an investigator, and our work is Amnesty International. We carry out investigation into the human rights situation. So rather than speculate about what may or may not be, what we can say is that even before we get to the issue of sanction, there is a very urgent need for the international community, both at the regional level, the regional players such as the African Union, the United Nations, the Office of the Secretary General, to dispatch those mechanisms that can help put pressure on the Ethiopian government to ensure, one, that these kind of atrocities stop, two, that independent and impartial investigations are carried out and that those responsible for war crimes and possibly for crimes against humanity are brought to justice. Because so long as the impunity that has prevailed for the past 9 months continues, there will be no disincentive on the combatants, and the risk is that they will continue to perpetrate such atrocities. That is why it's important that pressure is brought to bear on the Ethiopian government to also allow, for example, the African Commission on People and Human Rights has set up a commission of inquiry, but the Ethiopian government has so far rejected it. The UN Secretary General should dispatch his team of experts and his special representative on sexual violence in conflict. There are many options available that the international community has not put into effect yet that can put pressure and give a very clear message that such atrocities will have a cost and that there will be accountability, and that will send a very important message and will act as a disincentive for those who have been committing those violations. As for wider political negotiations and questions, a lot remains to be seen. The situation is extremely fluid on the ground.
Okay, Donatella, thank you very much for joining the program. I appreciate your contribution.